Well, hello again. We are reading in the Gospel of Luke, and today takes us to chapter 22. And in 22, we're coming close to the end of the Lord's earthly ministry and life. He's facing the crucifixion, and we begin the chapter with Judas Iscariot agreeing and plotting along with the religious leaders to betray Jesus and to have him crucified. We read of the Last Supper and Jesus really pouring out grace and a path to forgiveness through his sacrificial work. And I want to pick up after that and read a few verses and think about what's going on in his followers' lives, because really as we do that, it gives us a picture into our own lives. And today, I think appropriately, along with verse 46, just calling this "Get Up and Pray." So let me start here. And thank you for joining with me, and thank you for reading along in our Bible reading plan and everything. And I hope this time that we have together is a blessing to you. Let me pick up in verse 24 and read some of these verses here. It says, "A dispute arose among them as to which of them was considered to be greatest. Jesus said to them, 'The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules is like the one who serves.'" In verse 28, "You are those who have stood by me in my trials, and I confer on you a kingdom, just as my Father conferred one on me, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." He goes on, he says, "Simon, Simon," speaking of Peter, "Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." And that's like verses 24 through 32. And it goes on later after Jesus goes into the garden and prays. And he comes back to Peter, James, and John and finds them sleeping instead of praying with them. And he says, "Why are you sleeping?" he asked. "Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation." So anyway, let's unpack that just a little bit. The Lord, again, had shared with them during the Last Supper. He spoke to them of his being betrayed, and we know that to be Judas Iscariot by the very first verses. And then later in the garden, after what I had read, he shows up with the soldiers to arrest Jesus. In the midst of this most profound moment, though, where Jesus is sharing this meal with them, this Passover meal, and the new meaning of it by his sacrifice, the disciples all of a sudden break out in a moment, speaking of their position and their renown. And on one hand, I am amazed at their faithlessness, and on the other, I can relate to their pride, all in the same moment. But what is most amazing, it isn't their faithlessness or their pride or faithfulness, any of that. What remains true is the grace of God. And because as it unfolds there in this moment, Jesus challenges them not to jockey for position, but to remain and become servants like he has become, leaving the throne of heaven to serve all of humanity. He challenges them to be that way. And all in the same moment, talking about the grace of God, he assures them that their reward is certain, and their position with him and in his kingdom is certain. And even in the midst of their falling away, their failures, their, from betrayal to jockeying for the position to Peter's denial, he's still offering grace. And but again, by the time that Jesus goes and prays in the garden, as they process all this and think about all this stuff, they're just overcome with fear. They're overcome with grief, and they just fall into almost like a depressive, grief-stricken slumber. And Jesus warns them, even in the midst of their humanity, he says, get up and pray. And I think that is definitely a word for us. The Lord knows. And we need to be reminded of our frailty, and just remember that life is brief. And so we need God's help in that. God, help us to be faithful, to remain faithful and prayerful. And God help us to recognize you in all of our lives, decisions and actions, and all of our ways. In Jesus' name. I pray that indeed that I would be that. You could be that person that would get up and pray, because we need God to make it through. There are times that we are definitely overcome with our own securities and our own insecurities, and wanting to elevate ourselves and wanting to make more of ourselves than we really are. But we know what we should be, and we know of God's grace, but we need to walk in his grace to be faithful. And this chapter really points that out, as the disciples are a mess in the midst of some of the toughest circumstances that they've ever faced. So remember that you're not alone in your struggles. I'm not alone. We're together, and we should bind together. Remembering and praying and being faithful. And we can do that with the Lord's help, but we also need one another's help. Good reminder today. God bless you. I hope that's encouraging to you. You can pass this video along to whoever you think it may bless. God bless you, and we'll talk soon.